The courtroom was silent until Judge Amy Coney Barrett leaned forward with a sharp edge in her voice. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, "are you prepared to answer for the contradictions in your own record?" Reporters lifted their pens. Cameras zoomed closer. It sounded like the opening strike of a duel, and Barrett was determined to land the first blow. For a moment, the weight of the room shifted. Crockett sat still, listening as Barrett listed her accusations with precision. Words like hypocrisy, selective outrage, and grandstanding cut through the chamber. The judge framed her questions like traps designed to corner Crockett and strip her of credibility in front of the nation. Gasps moved across the gallery. The expectation was clear. Crockett would falter. She would stumble under the gravity of judicial authority, another politician silenced by the polished force of the bench. But instead of shrinking, Jasmine Crockett allowed the silence to stretch. Every second of pause magnified the tension until it felt like the entire courtroom was holding its breath. When she finally spoke, her words were sharp, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. "Judge Barrett," Crockett began, "when you attempt to corner me, you forget that the truth does not belong to robes or titles. It belongs to facts, and I came prepared with them all." The air cracked. Journalists who were already drafting headlines in their minds stopped mid-sentence. What was supposed to be a one-sided demolition had just shifted into a battle, and Crockett's tone suggested she had no intention of playing defense. The gavel hadn't moved, but the courtroom had flipped. What began as Barrett's attack was about to transform into Crockett's stage. This was not an ordinary hearing. The courtroom had become the stage for a national confrontation, carried live on every major network and dissected in real time on social media. Every word was amplified beyond the walls of the chamber, feeding a public already divided and restless. At the center sat Judge Amy Coney Barrett, her presence radiating authority. To many, she represented the weight of tradition, discipline, and the conservative backbone of America's highest court. She had built her career on carefully measured words and strict interpretations of the law. Today, she wanted to remind the nation that she was not merely a figurehead, but a force capable of bending opponents to her will. Facing her was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Young, bold, and unrelenting, she had quickly earned a reputation for cutting through political theater with fearless candor. Her supporters saw her as a voice of raw truth in a system built on evasions and courtesies. Her critics, however, called her reckless, brash, and dangerous. But whether admired or despised, she was impossible to ignore. The stakes went far beyond personal reputation. The issue at hand touched the core of national politics. Questions of accountability, transparency, and whether the powerful could hide behind institutions to silence dissent. The courtroom was not just a space for legal arguments, it had become the battleground for America's conscience. On one side, Barrett embodied the authority of the establishment, the law wrapped in tradition. On the other, Crockett stood as the challenger, ready to pierce through the layers of formality with hard truths. Every glance between them was charged with meaning, every pause a test of endurance. The press understood the magnitude instantly. Editors had already lined up their headlines: Barrett versus Crockett, clash of eras. Pundits whispered about what this confrontation would mean for upcoming elections, for the balance of the court, for the perception of truth itself in a fractured nation. And beyond the cameras, ordinary Americans were glued to their screens. Families argued in living rooms, co-workers debated during lunch breaks, hashtags surged to the top of Twitter. This was not just a legal proceeding. It was a moment where the nation weighed two visions of power, one robed in tradition, the other unafraid to smash through it with words as sharp as blades. Barrett believed she had the upper hand, but Crockett, steady and unblinking, was about to show that authority alone was not enough. Judge Barrett tightened her grip on the bench. Her voice was calm but sharpened to a blade. "Congresswoman, you speak of integrity, but where was your integrity when you defended policies that contradicted your own statements? Do you deny that your record reveals double standards?" Her words echoed across the chamber. The crowd leaned forward, sensing blood. Crockett did not flinch. She opened a folder stacked with documents, each page marked and highlighted. She lifted one sheet high enough for the cameras to catch. You ask about contradictions, Judge? Let's talk about consistency. Yours. Murmurs rippled through the room. Here is your ruling in case after case, Crockett continued, her voice growing sharper. When it came to shielding corporations, your decisions aligned with their interests every single time. But when ordinary Americans, workers, women, minorities stood before your court, your so-called consistency vanished. Do you deny that record? Barrett's jaw stiffened. The trap she had set for Crockett had twisted against her. You cannot compare judicial reasoning with political rhetoric, Barrett replied firmly. The law is not a place for theatrics. Crockett's tone sliced through the formality. And yet here we are, Judge, in a courtroom turned into a stage, not by me, but by your attempt to corner me. You speak of law as if it is sacred, but when decisions repeatedly fall to favor the powerful, what do you call that? Justice, or politics dressed in robes? Gasps filled the chamber. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. Barrett leaned forward, her voice rising. Are you accusing this court of corruption? Crockett's eyes locked on hers. I am accusing this system of protecting itself at the expense of the people. And if that truth is uncomfortable, then maybe it's time the discomfort sits here, at this bench, instead of always on the shoulders of those who cannot afford a voice. The room erupted. Shouts from the gallery, a rush of whispers, a gavel striking hard to restore order. Barrett attempted to regain control. Congresswoman, this chamber demands respect. If you cannot, but Crockett cut in, her words steady and undeniable. Respect is earned, Judge. It is not demanded through silence. The moment froze. Barrett had thrown the questions like darts, but Crockett had caught each one and hurled it back, sharper than before. The courtroom was no longer watching a cornered politician. They were watching a counterattack unfold with precision. For the first time, Barrett's authority wavered, and for the first time, Crockett's defiance became the heartbeat of the room. The gavel struck again, but the noise was drowned out by the tension radiating from every corner of the courtroom. Judge Barrett leaned forward, determined to reassert her authority. You presume much, Congresswoman, she said, her tone carrying steel. This court is not a platform for political theater. Answer the question plainly. Do you admit your rhetoric often exceeds the truth? It was meant to box Crockett in, to force her into a simple yes or no. But Crockett didn't hesitate. She rose from her seat, papers still in hand, and her voice carried like a crack of thunder. The truth, she declared, does not bend to who wears the robe. The truth is that Americans are tired of leaders who lecture them about rules while bending those same rules to protect privilege. And if you want to corner me into silence, Judge, then let me give you my plain answer. I will not be silent. The chamber erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even applause broke out despite the judge's stern commands for order. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing the instant Crockett turned defense into defiance. Barrett's face remained composed, but her authority no longer filled the room. Crockett had seized it, and she knew the moment demanded more. You ask about my record? Crockett continued, voice rising above the noise. I admit to one thing only. I stand with the people who cannot stand in these chambers themselves. I admit that my so-called contradictions are nothing compared to the hypocrisy of those who claim neutrality while ruling in favor of power time and time again. If that makes me guilty, then let the nation judge me, not just this bench. The words hit like a hammer. Even Barrett, shielded by years of judicial detachment, was momentarily struck silent. Crockett leaned forward, her final line ringing with deliberate force. You tried to corner me, Judge, but the truth is simple. Corners collapse when you push hard enough, and today this courtroom belongs not to power, but to the people watching. The silence that followed was deafening. Reporters froze, realizing they had just witnessed the line that would dominate every headline. Barrett, for the first time, had no retort ready. The entire chamber understood. The fight had flipped. The judge's attempt to dominate had birthed a moment of reversal so sharp, so undeniable, that Crockett stood not as the one questioned, but as the one delivering judgment. The courtroom, once brimming with the weight of Barrett's authority, now vibrated with the echo of Crockett's words. The judge's gavel rested in her hand, but it no longer commanded the same fear. Every camera, every pen, every eye was fixed on Jasmine Crockett. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply stood in the silence she had created, letting it speak louder than any further rebuttal. And then, with deliberate calm, she delivered her closing strike. America deserves leaders who fight for the truth, not for titles. Judges, politicians, presidents, none of us are above the people we serve. If my words today feel dangerous, it's because they carry the power that comes from honesty. And honesty, Judge, is not mine alone. It belongs to the millions who sent me here. The gallery erupted. Applause thundered despite repeated calls for order. Journalists scrambled to capture the quotes already burning across social media. Hashtags shot to the top of trending lists within minutes. Crockett flips the court. #Truth on trial. #Barrett vs. Crockett. Barrett, still cloaked in the dignity of her position, tried to regain composure. But no words she spoke could erase the fact that the narrative had shifted entirely. What began as her attempt to expose contradictions had ended with her own authority questioned, her control fractured, her courtroom claimed by another's voice. That night, across America, television screens replayed the moment again and again. Crockett's words became sound bites, her lines repeated like rallying cries. Analysts argued over the political fallout. Had Barrett overreached? Had Crockett transformed herself into a national force overnight? The nation buzzed, polarized, but electrified. For her supporters, it was victory, proof that courage could defy even the highest bench. For her critics, it was infuriating, proof that the courtroom had been turned into a battlefield of rhetoric. But regardless of perspective, one truth was undeniable. Crockett had flipped the room, and no one who watched would forget it. The image of her standing, unshaken, facing down a Supreme Court judge became the defining snapshot of the day. Not just a clash of personalities, but a statement about power itself. And as the echoes of her words faded into history, one message remained clear. In an era where silence is demanded, the refusal to be silent is the loudest act of all.